The day my biological parents brought me back to Beijing, Luis openly declared his love for his unattainable crush. He also told a few childhood friends. It's fortunate that Nicole's biological parents found her and took her back home. Otherwise, with Nicole's spoiled nature, who knows how she might have bullied Emma. It's best if she stays in Beijing forever and never returns. His friends looked at each other, worried that I would find out and disrupt the gathering. I just smiled. I boarded the plane to Beijing, just as Luis had hoped. In this life, I will never come back. Because before going home, I had agreed to an arranged marriage set up by my family. The other party was the heir to Beijing's wealthiest family, Sam. Moreover, before leaving, I left behind a bank card containing 10 million, considering it compensation for Luis and his parents for taking care of me. From then on, separated by vast distances, Luis and I would never meet again. Chapter 01. When I found out that I had located my biological parents, my heart was a whirlwind of emotions, sour, bitter, yet with an undeniable trace of hidden joy. I foolishly thought that without the burden of our supposed sibling bond, Luis and I could finally be like any other lovers, walking hand in hand through life. But when I rushed over to share the news with Luis, my excitement and hope were instantly extinguished like a bucket of ice-cold water poured over me. Inside the private lounge, Emma leaned intimately against Luis, surrounded by their sycophantic friends, whose laughter and flattery filled the room. Oh wow, Luis, you're a true master of the dating game. You even managed to seduce your own sister. Now that takes some serious skill. A man in a floral shirt smirked, his voice dripping with mockery. A bet is a bet. Damn, my brand new Ferrari is yours now. Haha. This forbidden romance act was pretty exciting. Huh? So, tell us, how does she taste? Their laughter echoed throughout the room, completely unrestrained. Luis's voice was devoid of emotion, his tone as cold as ice. Sister? She's nothing but a stray that ended up under our roof. Always so eager to please. It's disgusting. I don't know why my parents ever picked her up. I heard she's been acting all high and mighty in your house, breaking up several of your relationships just because she has your parents backing her up. One of Luis's so-called friends sneered, swirling his wine glass in his hand. The wine sloshed over the rim, splashing onto the floor, just like the undisguised malice in their words. Luis spoke again, his voice dripping with contempt. Our family fed and clothed her for 18 years, and she really thought she was some kind of rich heiress. She's nothing but a worthless bastard. His friends erupted in agreement. Exactly. She should take a long look in the mirror. I bet her biological parents dumped her for a reason, probably because she was nothing but a burden. Yeah. Look at her pathetic self. Her real parents must have been too embarrassed to claim her, which is why they abandoned her for all these years. And she actually thought she could climb her way up to be with you? Delusional. She needs to wake up and realize her place. Ungrateful brat. After all these years, she's still leeching off your family and trying to seduce you? Absolutely shameless. Who knows what dirty tricks she's been pulling behind the scenes? Their ridicule and laughter rang in my ears, each word branding itself onto my soul like a searing hot iron. In that moment, my fragile, secret love was completely shattered. All those ambiguous glances, those fleeting touches, they were nothing but a game, a bet, a cruel joke. I stood at the doorway, my hands clenched into fists, nails digging deep into my palms. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I forced them back. Taking 2 deep breaths, I shoved the door open with all my strength. It slammed against the wall with a loud bang, and the room instantly fell silent. Ignoring their mocking gazes, I walked straight up to Luis. Brother, I said, my voice calm but firm. Mom wants you to come home. Luis swirled the wine in his glass without even looking at me. Emma, sensing the tension, quickly stepped forward, grabbing my arm in feigned concern. Nicole, you're here. Perfect timing. Why don't you join us? I wasn't used to physical contact with others. Instinctively, I recoiled, pulling my arm away. Emma hadn't expected my reaction and dramatically fell to the ground with a startled cry. Luis immediately stepped forward to help her up. She took the opportunity to lean into his embrace, tears shimmering in her eyes. Nicole, I know I shouldn't have come back after promising to leave, but I just couldn't help myself. Luis is so good to me. I She hesitated, casting Luis a meaningful glance. So, Emma only disappeared back then because Nicole forced her to? Someone sneered. Emma sobbed even harder in Luis's arms. Luis, it's all my fault. I shouldn't have come back. Nicole must hate me. Luis's gaze darkened with disgust. Without warning, he raised his hand and slapped me across the face. A sharp smack rang through the room. My cheek instantly burned with pain, my head snapping to the side as a loud ringing filled my ears. Nicole, who the hell do you think you are to cause a scene here? With that, Luis scooped Emma into his arms and strode out of the room, never once looking back at me. There was no trace of the warmth he once had for me in his eyes, only anger and contempt. I clutched my burning cheek, my heart feeling as though it had been slashed open. I had long grown used to his cruel words, yet I still couldn't stop myself from thinking maybe this was just a moment of impulsive anger. Maybe he had lost control in the heat of the moment. I told myself that he didn't truly mean it, that he was just blinded by rage, and that once he calmed down, everything would return to how it was before. I had been telling myself this for 7 years. Countless times, I imagined the moment we would finally stand face to face, clearing up all our misunderstandings, just like we did when we were kids, when every fight would end with reconciliation. I believed that if I waited long enough, if I was patient enough, he would one day lower his thorns and show me that gentle smile once more. But now, that single slap shattered every memory that had kept me holding on. It felt as if an invisible hand had wrapped around my heart, squeezing it so tightly that I could hardly breathe. I told myself, just this once, let the pain consume me, and after that, I would finally let go. Chapter 02. I stumbled back to Luis's house in a daze, each step feeling like I was dragging a 1,000-pound chain behind me. In the living room, Luis's mother sat elegantly on the sofa, her head lowered as she admired her freshly done nails. Her well-maintained face bore no warmth, only pure disdain. Nicole, I told you to get rid of that little whore Emma. But you failed. I told you to bring Luis back. And you failed at that too. Useless. What a waste raising you in this house. She sneered, her voice sharp and grating. I lowered my head, not daring to respond. Or are you deliberately going against me? Even if I don't approve of Emma, don't think for a second that you stand a chance. Do you even know your place? A worthless stray living under someone else's roof, dreaming of climbing up the social ladder? Luis's mother raised her head, her gaze filled with even more contempt as she sized me up from head to toe, as if inspecting a defective product. She didn't care about the truth. She never did. She only knew how to blame me, using the most venomous words to tear me down. It was always like this, acting all kind and sweet when she needed something from me, then turning around and throwing me under the bus when things didn't go her way. Just like all those times she had me clean up the messes left by the women around Luis. She never thought they were good enough for their family's prestigious status, so she sent me to pay them off and make them disappear. I did as she ordered, even though it was a thankless, miserable task. But the moment Luis got upset and complained to her, she would play the innocent victim, acting as if she had no idea what had happened. Then, she'd push all the blame onto me, claiming I was acting out of jealousy and overstepping my boundaries. And Luis, he always believed her without question. His gaze toward me would turn cold, filled with disgust. For the sake of the family's reputation, for the so-called gratitude of being raised in this house, I swallowed my pride time and time again. It was like an invisible rope tightening around me, restraining me, making me too afraid to resist, forcing me to endure in silence. But each wound, each betrayal, felt like another deep cut carved into my heart. You're afraid of your son hating you, so you push me forward as the villain. And now, suddenly, everything is my fault? Luis's mother's face darkened instantly at my defiance. She shot up from her seat, marched over to me, and with a sharp smack, delivered a loud slap across my face. You dare talk back? You ungrateful little wretch. 2 slaps in one day. What a miserable day this had turned out to be. I glanced down at the phone number in my hand. Maybe, if I went back to my biological parents, I wouldn't have to endure this anymore. Chapter 03. A week ago, on my way home from school, a black luxury sedan with a full 8 license plate blocked my path. The car door opened, and a graceful, elegantly dressed woman stepped out, staring at me intently. Her eyes were filled with longing, guilt, and pain, shimmering with unshed tears. Beside her, a tall man stood straight, his expression serious. Yet he couldn't conceal the joy of reunion. Perhaps it was the undeniable pull of blood ties. But with just one glance, an inexplicable sense of familiarity washed over me. They told me they were my biological parents. At first, I didn't believe them. I thought they were human traffickers. But after their persistent persuasion, I agreed to go with them to the hospital for a DNA test. Holding the thin sheet of paper in my hands, my eyes landed on the words, parent-child relationship confirmed. Yet, my first thought was not about them. Instead, my mind drifted to something Luis had said to me on his 17th birthday. That day, he stood before me, his gaze brighter than the stars in the night sky. There was something in his eyes, something I didn't quite understand, with the faint scent of alcohol lingering in the air, or perhaps with complete and utter sincerity. He softly murmured, "You are the rose I planted with my own hands, nurtured with nothing but love. If only I weren't your brother and you weren't my sister, then we could love each other without restraint." The moment those words reached my ears, my heart pounded wildly. A fleeting, innocent love sprouted in my chest, like a seed buried deep within me, one that quickly took root and flourished. It compelled me, made me a fool, blindly chasing after Luis without hesitation. Back then, my whole world revolved around Luis. So, when my biological parents asked me to return to Beijing with them, I refused without a second thought. I still remember the moment disappointment flashed through their eyes. My mother's gaze was filled with sorrow and reluctance. She reached out, gently grasping my hand, her lips trembling as if she wanted to persuade me. But in the end, she didn't say a word. My father, standing beside her, remained silent, his brow furrowed slightly, his stern face betraying a hint of helplessness. But they didn't force me. They understood that after all these years apart, a gap had formed between us. They didn't want to make it worse. Business in Beijing needed their attention, and after staying with me for 2 days, they left with heavy hearts. Before leaving, my mother pulled me into a tight embrace. "Don't ever let yourself suffer. If you ever run into any trouble, promise me you'll call your father and me. No matter what, we will always be your strongest support." For the first time, my father's serious expression softened when he looked at me. He handed me several bank cards. "I've prepared these for you. Use them as you like, buy whatever you want. And you young people use VX, WeChat, right?" As he spoke, he pulled out his phone and swiftly opened WeChat. "Add me. From now on, I'll transfer money to you every day. We know we owe you too much for these past years, and all we want now is for you to live a life free of worries." In his eyes, I saw guilt, but also a deep sense of love and devotion, like he was looking at a long-lost treasure, one he desperately wished to make up for. I thought to myself, so this is what true family feels like? I won't deny it. At that moment, I was moved. Chapter 04. To be with Emma. Luis completely fell out with his parents. In a fit of rage, Luis's father had him locked in his room, forbidding him from stepping outside even once. But Luis, blinded by love, refused to accept this. In a reckless attempt to escape, he jumped straight from the third-floor window, fracturing his right leg in the process. He was rushed to the hospital immediately. In the past, even the smallest scratch on Luis would feel like the end of the world to me. I still remember when we were kids, and Luis accidentally fell from a rock garden while playing. I cried for an entire day and night, my eyes swollen like walnuts. I had stayed by his bedside, refusing to leave even for a second. Seeing me in such a pitiful, worried state, Luis had chuckled softly. He reached out, ruffled my hair, and made a promise. "I'll never be reckless again. I'll take good care of myself, and I'll take care of you too." Back then, we were so close. When did everything change? I pushed down the surge of emotions rising in my chest. Just then, a soft, delicate voice interrupted my thoughts. "Nicole, are you here to visit Luis?" I looked up and saw Emma approaching, dressed in an elegant white dress, graceful like a blooming white lotus. She carried a food container in one hand, walking toward me with dainty steps. I didn't reply. At this moment, I had no interest in engaging with her. Sensing my cold indifference, Emma's mask of innocence cracked, revealing a look of disdain and jealousy. Ha! Stop pretending to be so pure. I heard you found your biological parents. Let me guess, you just can't bear to part with Luis's family wealth. So you came crawling back to beg him to let you stay? I let out a sharp laugh. Do you really think everyone is as desperate as you, willing to do anything for money and status? Me? Desperate? Emma sneered. Nicole, you've been living off Luis's family for years, enjoying everything they have. Don't tell me you weren't just clinging on to him this whole time. I stood up, meeting her gaze head-on. My conscience is clear, but do you really think Luis's parents don't see through your little tricks? You might be able to fool Luis, but not them. Just then, the sound of footsteps echoed from the distance. Emma's eyes flickered, and before I could react, she violently knocked the food container from her hand. The delicate bento box crashed to the ground, shattering into pieces as food spilled everywhere. Then, in the blink of an eye, she threw herself against the wall, letting out a dramatic shriek. I stared at her, stunned by the ridiculous performance. Oh, can't win the argument. So you're playing the victim now? Before I could even decide whether to help her up or not, a sudden force shoved me away. Luis, limping, had rushed over, his once handsome face twisted in anger. Emma nestled into his embrace, sobbing pitifully. Luis, I just came to see you and say a few words to Nicole. I don't know why she suddenly did this to me. I'm so scared. Luis, do you think I'm stupid enough to attack her in broad daylight? In front of everyone? It was clearly, before I could finish, Luis's hand shot up. I barely dodged, feeling the gust of wind brush past my face, sending a few strands of my hair flying. My eyes widened in disbelief. Luis, did you just try to hit me? My gaze locked onto him, flames of fury burning like an erupting volcano. The anger that had been suppressed for far too long finally ignited. Before he could react, I swung back, hard. A loud slap echoed through the hospital corridor. That slap wasn't just for this moment, it carried the weight of all the years of humiliation and betrayal. With a cold smirk, I reached out and yanked Emma by the hair, dragging her out of Luis's arms like she was nothing more than a rag doll. Then, I slammed her head against the wall. At 5 feet 7 inches, 170 centimeters, wearing high heels, I towered over Emma, who barely reached 5 feet 1 inch, 155 centimeters. Dragging her felt no different from holding up a tiny, struggling chick. Take a good look, Luis. I slammed her again. This is what I actually did. Emma's forehead swelled instantly, her entire body trembling. Luis's eyes widened in shock. Nicole, are you insane? A nosy passerby recorded the entire scene and uploaded it online. The situation was quickly twisted into a scandalous drama, 2 women fighting over a man. A catfight between the mistress and the fiancé. I never expected that before leaving I would have the chance to vent my emotions so recklessly. Yes. In the moment Luis raised his hand to strike me, I had already woken up from this long, absurd dream. The blind love I once had. The unconditional devotion I poured into him at the instant his palm lifted against me. It all became laughable. I was finally awake, and I had made up my mind. I had already called my biological parents. I was leaving for Beijing to start a new life with them. But what I didn't expect was the shocking news they delivered over the phone. They had already arranged a marriage for me. According to my mother, my grandfather and the grandfather of the wealthiest family in the country were once war comrades, sharing life and death experiences on the battlefield. In their youth, they made a pact to unite their families through marriage. But fate played its cruel hand. I was kidnapped at the age of 5. 4 years. My family never gave up searching for me, yet no one could have imagined that I was so close. Living in Haicheng, just a few dozen kilometers from Beijing. This time, they finally found me thanks to the hospital's screening records. Now, my grandfather's old comrade was growing frail with age, and his greatest wish was to see his grandson marry before he passed away. Even after all these years, he still held on to the promise made between the two families, hoping that I would become his grandson's wife. I admired and respected the old man, and I figured that anyone raised by him couldn't possibly be a terrible person. An arranged marriage sounded cold and distant. But maybe, just maybe, this was my chance for a new beginning, a way to finally find peace in my life. I could try to let go of the past. Perhaps accepting fate's arrangement wouldn't be so bad after all. Chapter 05. The day I left. The sun was as blinding as ever. I took one last look around. But in the end, I left with nothing. The belongings I had accumulated over the years were nothing more than remnants of a past I no longer wished to remember. On the desk in my bedroom, I left behind a bank card with 10 million yuan. Consider it repayment for the years Luis and his parents spent raising me. I wanted nothing from the Luis family. Not their money. Not their affection. Meanwhile, across town, Luis had rented out the most extravagant restaurant in Haicheng for an over-the-top confession to Emma. My WeChat feed was flooded with photos and videos. Balloons in vibrant colors filled the sky. Roses, lush and crimson, spread like an endless sea of flowers. In the center of it all, Luis and Emma stood like the prince and princess of a fairy tale, gazing at each other with unwavering devotion, lost in their own world. The group chat buzzed with blessings and congratulations. I chuckled at myself. In their world, I really had been reduced to nothing more than the cliché vicious acts in some melodramatic love story. The villain who tried to ruin their happiness, with nothing better to do. I waited in the airport lounge. One by one, I deleted them from my contacts, exited the group chats, blocked them all, severing ties with my past for good. Just then, my phone rang. It was my best friend, Rita. Nicole, where the hell are you? Her voice was as fiery and direct as always. I'm at the airport. What? You're really just leaving like this? Rita's voice shot up in disbelief. Listen, remember when you asked me to look into why Emma disappeared back then? Well, I found out. And trust me, it's some major gossip. Come out now. Let's crash their stupid party together. I shook my head and calmly declined. No, I don't want to be involved with Luis or Emma anymore. I've struggled in their world for too long. Now, my dear, I'm off to my arranged marriage with a wealthy heir. Time to be a rich housewife. I joked lightly. You mean the one your biological parents arranged for you in Beijing? Rita sounded surprised. The heir of the wealthiest family in the country. Let money completely corrupt me. I don't even care about looks. I just love money. I joked. But then my eyes fell on the photo my mother had sent me. Sam. The moment I saw his face, I froze. It was a face seemingly blessed by the gods, flawless. Snow-white skin, features sculpted with precision, and eyes that seemed to hold an entire galaxy within them. All traces of reluctance toward this arranged marriage vanished in an instant. Ah, so moving on was this easy. Chapter 06. Meanwhile, in the grand banquet hall, Luis's gaze remained locked onto Rita, who stood in a far corner. She held her phone tightly, her expression tense as she spoke in hushed tones to someone on the other end. Every so often, she darted cautious glances around the room, as if on high alert. Seeing this, the corners of Luis's lips curled into a knowing smirk. He knew all too well, out of everyone here, Rita was the closest to Nicole. Every time something happened, she was the first to tip Nicole off. Luis felt conflicted. On one hand, he hated Nicole's constant surveillance, her need to always keep tabs on him. But on the other hand, he relished it. He reveled in the way her attention never wavered from him. How, in her world, he was the son, her one and only, untouchable, irreplaceable. This time was no different. He had orchestrated this grand confession for Emma, deliberately choosing the very day Nicole was leaving for Beijing. A small, selfish part of him still harbored a secret hope, though he would never admit it. Tilting his chin up, he feigned nonchalance, speaking to his childhood friends with an air of indifference. It's a good thing Nicole's biological parents finally found her and took her home. Otherwise, with her spoiled personality, who knows how much she'd torment Emma. He acted as if he didn't care, yet his grip around his wine glass tightened slightly. She's probably at the airport right now. Then again, one of his friends smirked. Maybe she ditched her flight and is on her way here to crash the party. Haha. Knowing her, she'd go absolutely insane right in the middle of the banquet. She's already been acting crazy lately. Didn't she slap both Luis and Emma a few days ago? Maybe she's just another scorned woman, lashing out in jealousy. Luis swirled the wine in his glass, watching the deep red liquid shimmer under the chandelier's glow. The moment he thought of that slap, The side of his face tingled, as if it still burned from the impact. No matter how far he pushed her before, Nicole had never dared to lay a hand on him, even when she was upset. She had never turned that anger against him. Luis clenched his jaw, a dark glint flashing in his eyes. Let her come back. He'd make her pay for it. Just then, one of his sleazier friends, a man with a face full of scars and a lewd glint in his eyes, chuckled. It's a shame, though, she's got such a pretty face. If I had known this was how things would turn out, I would have just taken her first. Didn't Victor try to drug her before? Another friend scoffed. Too bad he failed. Otherwise, we all could have had our fun with her. A few of the men exchanged sleazy, knowing grins. Exactly. That girl's got a nice figure too. Ha. If she actually shows up here, we'll have plenty of chances to teach her a lesson. The moment Luis heard those vile words, an uncontrollable fury ignited within him. His anger erupted in an instant. With a sharp movement, he hurled his wine glass directly at the leering man's face. The glass shattered on impact. A spray of crimson wine splattered across the man's skin, mixing with the blood trickling from the cuts on his face. You sick bastards! Luis roared, his eyes bloodshot with rage. He lunged forward, grabbing the man by his collar, and without hesitation, threw a brutal punch straight into his jaw. How dare you even think that way about her? Gasps filled the air. No one had expected Luis to react so violently, let alone for Nicole. The other men scrambled to pull Luis away, their hands reaching out in a desperate attempt to restrain him. Luis. What the hell? We were just joking. It's not like we haven't said stuff like this before. To them, casual vulgarities about women were nothing more than cheap entertainment. Among these spoiled heirs, crude jokes and inappropriate remarks had become the norm, a twisted part of their world where malice was masked as humor. Emma's coming over any minute. Luis. Don't lose your head over this. Luis shook them off, his gaze sharp as a blade as it swept over the room. Everyone fell silent, knowing full well that tonight's celebration had already spiraled into something entirely different. Deep down, they had all expected some kind of drama to unfold at this party, but not a single one of them had anticipated that the first to start this war would be none other than its leading star. The shattered wine glass lay on the floor, gleaming under the chandelier's glow, like the first trumpet of battle, shattering the fragile illusion of peace. And this was only the beginning. Chapter 07. On the central screen, the banquet hall was supposed to be immersed in a heartwarming video of Luis and Emma's romantic memories. However, halfway through, the footage abruptly changed. What appeared next sent a bone-chilling wave through the entire hall. Emma, caught in a series of indecent photos with a wealthy businessman. One after another, the scandalous images flashed across the screen, each one landing like a brutal slap across Luis's face. The explicit nature of the content left everyone stunned into silence. As the video continued, even more damning evidence surfaced: recordings, surveillance clips, and incriminating messages. The truth unraveled before their eyes. Emma hadn't left all those years ago out of selflessness, nor was she pursuing further studies abroad. As she had claimed, she had latched onto a wealthy businessman, planning to squeeze one last sum of money before leaving. Although Luis's family was wealthy, they controlled his finances strictly. Compared to that, a man who handed her a limitless credit card and tens of thousands in allowance every month was far more appealing. But fate had its way of catching up. While overseas, Emma's scandalous behavior had been exposed by the businessman's legal wife, a woman with significant power and influence in that country. Left with no other choice, Emma was forced to flee back home, seeking refuge. Gasps and whispers erupted throughout the hall, merging into a cacophony of shock and disbelief. Emma's face turned deathly pale. The wine glass in her hand slipped and shattered on the floor. Panic-stricken, she rushed toward the backstage, desperate to stop the footage from playing. Her once poised and elegant demeanor had crumbled into sheer desperation. No, this isn't real. It's Nicole. She's framing me. Tears streamed down her face as she spun toward Luis. Luis, you have to believe me. I love you. Luis stared at Emma, his expression unreadable. She was undeniably beautiful. Even in this humiliating moment, she exuded a frail, pitiful allure, one that could easily make any man hesitate. That could stir a protective instinct deep within them. Emma was his first love. The feelings nurtured in the innocence of youth always carried a unique, irreplaceable weight. For years, he had held on to the belief that she was the one, the only one. When Emma left without graduating, he had always assumed it was Nicole who had driven her away. That misunderstanding had festered like an untreated wound, poisoning his heart with resentment. Fury and hatred had consumed him. He drowned himself in the neon lights of nightclubs, numbing the emptiness inside with alcohol and cigarettes. He surrounded himself with reckless people, brawling without reason, dragging himself deeper into a downward spiral. Every indulgence, every moment of recklessness, it was all an act of defiance, a rebellion against his past self, a twisted form of retaliation against Nicole. But never, never had he imagined that the truth he had clung to so stubbornly would shatter so effortlessly before his very eyes. Chapter 08. The grand confession had turned into nothing more than a humiliating spectacle. Luis returned home in a daze, his mind in turmoil. As he walked past the hallway, he stopped in front of the room that once belonged to her. His hand hovered in midair, hesitating for a moment before he slowly pushed open the door. Nothing had changed. Everything inside remained exactly as it was when she left, as if time had frozen in place. A flicker of hope ignited in Luis's heart. It made him believe that she would come back. The everlasting flower on the bedside table still bloomed vibrantly under the sunlight, as radiant as the day he had given it to her. Silently, it whispered the promises they once made. Back then, before Emma ever existed in his life, he had said to her, "You are the flower I planted with my own hands. Nurtured with love, you will never wither, never fade." For a moment, it felt like he was back at 17. At that time, his world had only revolved around her, and his heart had been filled with dreams of their future together. But now, his fingertips brushed against the edges of the petals, feeling the spot where they had turned pale, dried traces of old tears, marks that could never be erased. Like a scar that time refused to heal, Luis rubbed his stinging eyes. Then, from the corner of his vision, something caught his attention on the desk. His entire body jolted, his breathing hitched, and he stumbled backward, as if he had been physically struck. A small bank card lay on the desk, unassuming. Yet in his hands, it felt as heavy as molten iron, burning through his skin, branding his heart with unbearable pain. He knew what it meant. It was her final farewell, a symbol of the severed ties between them. A clear, absolute message. Nicole had drawn the line. She had erased herself from his life completely. Luis clenched the card tighter, his fingers turning bone-white from the pressure. His lips trembled slightly, but no words came out. Only endless, suffocating regret consumed him from within. Chapter 09. When I received another call from Rita, I was sitting in my new home in Beijing, locked in an awkward stare with Sam, who was seated across from me. "Nicole, you should have seen Emma's face." Rita cackled through the phone, laughing so hard she nearly choked. "She looked like a plucked chicken. Ha ha ha." "And Luis? Oh, he definitely didn't see that coming, his so-called pure and untouchable first love turning out to be like that. But honestly, serves him right." Hearing no reaction from me, Rita clicked her tongue, sounding a little disappointed. "TCH, fine. Forget about them. How's your new place?" I had always known that any family wealthy enough to arrange a marriage with the country's richest heir would be beyond ordinary. But it wasn't until I actually arrived that I realized how naive my imagination had been. Located in the heart of one of the most expensive cities in the world, my new home wasn't just a mansion, it was an estate. Sprawling green lawns stretched endlessly like a carpet of velvet, and at the center of it all stood a breathtakingly majestic castle, straight out of a dream. And this wasn't even the main residence. This was just the gifted property they had prepared for me, a place so lavish. It made me feel like I had mistakenly wandered into a fairy tale. I glanced at the man beside me, Sam, whose stunning features were just as unreal as my surroundings. This plot had escalated from villainous ex-fiancé to pampered little princess. "What's making you smile like that?" Sam's voice pulled me back to reality. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows, casting a golden halo around his soft hair. He leaned in slightly, closing the distance between us. And with the subtle movement, a faint hint of mint drifted through the air. Just my friend, I replied with a light-hearted chuckle. She was telling me something funny. Without realizing it, my voice had softened, as if afraid of disrupting the serene, almost dreamlike moment. Looks like it was really funny. Sam chuckled softly before pausing, a flicker of anticipation flashing in his eyes. I know a place where we can double that happiness. Want to go? My face instantly turned crimson. What kind of place? An amusement park, he answered simply, his gaze holding a boyish excitement. I let out an awkward laugh, quickly clearing my mind of any unnecessary thoughts. Sam walked at a relaxed pace, always maintaining just the right amount of distance between us. But every now and then, his arm would accidentally brush against mine. Each fleeting touch sent a tingling sensation through me, like an electric current racing across my skin, leaving behind a warmth that spread all the way to my cheeks. I glanced away, a little embarrassed. Yet somehow, deep inside, I found myself looking forward to the next time. After trying a few attractions, Sam led me toward the Ferris wheel. Above us, the night sky shimmered with vibrant lights. Each capsule was like a tiny, secret world, nestled within the grand wheel, rising and falling, just like the turning gears of fate. Did you know? I've stood here countless times before. I always thought, if I hadn't insisted on coming to the amusement park that day, would you have never gone missing? He took a deep breath, his expression a mixture of hope, tenderness, and something else, something complex that I couldn't quite decipher. You were so little back then, and I let go of your hand because I was too busy playing. The moment I realized you were gone, it felt like my entire world had collapsed. As he spoke, faint images surfaced in my mind, the warm glow of the sun reflecting off the colorful amusement park grounds. A tiny version of myself, dressed in a pale yellow dress, hair tied into two small pigtails, staring earnestly at a young Sam. Big brother, I like you the most. Little Sam had smiled sweetly at me. Now, standing under the Ferris wheel, he gently lifted his hand, running his fingers lightly through my hair. A quiet, intimate warmth spread between us, wrapping us in an atmosphere of something unspoken yet undeniable. Thank you for coming back. My heartbeat quickened. Everything around me faded into a blur, except for him, and the glowing Ferris wheel, turning slowly in the background. Chapter 10. The day after I returned home, my parents wasted no time in changing my last name. When I saw my new identification with those 3 fresh characters printed on it, an inexplicable sense of belonging washed over me. It felt as though my heart, after drifting aimlessly for years, had finally found a safe harbor. Mom and Dad treated me like a priceless treasure they had finally recovered, carefully, tenderly, but also with an overwhelming enthusiasm they couldn't suppress. In this house, I was allowed to do anything I wanted. Anything. Except one thing. My parents were way too nosy about my relationship with Sam. Almost every day, they would casually ask about my progress with him, leaving me slightly embarrassed. Nicole, sweetheart, Sam is such a wonderful young man. I can tell that he truly likes you, Mom would say, her voice filled with certainty. But if you don't feel the same, that's okay too. No pressure. You are what matters most to us. It wasn't that I didn't like Sam. I just couldn't shake the feeling that this was all too good to be true. A man like Sam, perfectly handsome, effortlessly charming, an incredible physique, impeccable family background. Why on earth would someone like him be interested in me? It was as if the universe had customized him to fit my exact preferences. Was this a scam? Rita told me this was simply the universe compensating me for the disaster that was Luis. You survived the worst. Girl, this is karma paying you back. Mom ruffled my hair with a smile. My precious daughter deserves the very best in this world. After spending half a month in Beijing, I had gradually adjusted to the rhythm of life here. Every day was filled with delicious food, laughter, and playful teasing with the ever-so-perfect Sam. Life here was way better than it ever was in Haicheng. But what I never expected was to run into Luis again. Chapter 11. The butler informed me that there was a man outside, demanding to see me. Even after being chased away by security, he refused to leave. Curiosity got the best of me, and I decided to go take a look. Luis stood there, looking far from his usual self, The man who was always so meticulously put together now had disheveled hair, and his bloodshot eyes told a story of sleepless nights. He was nothing like the confident, composed Luis I once knew. In his hands, he held a bouquet of roses. Nicole. His voice was hoarse, trembling slightly as he spoke my name. What are you doing here? You're not welcome. Nicole. I know I was wrong. I was an idiot. He stopped right in front of me. I shouldn't have treated you like that. I shouldn't have let those people humiliate you. And most of all, I shouldn't have been so blind to my own heart. I let out a cold laugh. Do you really think it's not too late to say this now? Luis. Who do you think you are? Do you really believe that an apology is enough to erase everything you did to me? Pain flashed across his face. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but Nicole, I can't live without you. Every day you've been gone, it feels like my heart is being ripped apart. He reached out to grab my hand, but I slapped his hand away. We grew up together. Luis's eyes turned red, and with a sudden thud, he fell to his knees in front of me. I froze. Nicole, please, give me a chance, even if it's just to make up for my mistakes. I love you, and I finally understand that this love has always been there. I was just too blind, too proud, too caught up in illusions to see it. It doesn't matter anymore. I replied calmly. I have a new life now. I have someone who truly loves me, who treasures me. I don't need your apologies. Leave, and stop disrupting my life. Luis, still unwilling to give up, took a step forward, only to be stopped by Sam. Sam? What are you doing here? My eyes lit up with surprise as I looked at him. Of course. Someone gave me a heads up, Sam replied, tilting his head toward the butler, who peeked out from behind the doorway and gave me a playful wink before disappearing again. This is between Nicole and me. You have no right to interfere, Luis shouted, his eyes burning with jealousy and resentment. No right? Sam scoffed, his voice steady and commanding. Nicole is my fiancée, and I'm never going to let you hurt her again. I stood behind Sam, staring at him with admiration as he shielded me protectively. A faint sparkle lit up my eyes. This level of protective fiancé energy was seriously swoon-worthy. Luis, just go. Don't make me despise you even more. My voice was calm yet unwavering. I knew it now. I had truly let him go. Sam loosened his grip on Luis's wrist as if discarding something worthless. Then, he pulled me closer, wrapping his arm protectively around my shoulders. Luis staggered back slightly, as if all the strength had been drained from him. He turned around and walked away, each step heavier than the last. Chapter 12. After walking for a while, Sam suddenly stopped. Before I could react, he turned around and pulled me tightly into his embrace. He buried his face in the crook of my neck, his warm breath tickling my skin. With a hint of playfulness, he murmured, Nicole, you're not wavering because of him, right? I'm way better than he is. I blinked in surprise. Oh, then tell me, in what ways are you better? Sam lifted his head, his strikingly beautiful eyes filled with childlike seriousness. For starters, looks. Look at him. All scruffy and miserable. How could he possibly compare to me? I rolled my eyes playfully. So full of yourself, but every time you see my face, you can't help but sneak a few extra glances. Can you? He arched a brow, a confident smirk tugging at his lips. Personality, I'm gentle and considerate. Him? Reckless and stupid. And most importantly, I will never be fickle. His gaze softened, flickering with a quiet intensity. Do you know something, Nicole? From the moment I first saw you, my world has only had room for you. Something in my heart fluttered at his words. Rising onto my tiptoes, I leaned forward and pressed a soft kiss against his perfectly sculpted cheek. Then I'll give you the chance to take care of me for a lifetime. Chapter 13. Later, Rita told me that after Luis was rejected in the garden that day, he completely lost himself in alcohol and self-destruction. His reckless lifestyle eventually took a toll on his health. He and Emma had cut ties after the disastrous engagement party. But 2 months later, she suddenly reappeared, pregnant. She wore loose-fitting clothes, deliberately accentuating the curve of her stomach, making it impossible to ignore. Luis's family had never liked Emma, but the moment they realized she might be carrying the only heir to the family name, Their attitude changed completely. Emma got exactly what she wanted, marriage. Originally, Luis's mother was the dominant figure in the household. But now, with her pregnancy as a shield, Emma became increasingly arrogant, always putting on a pitiful, delicate act in front of Luis's father. Her soft, tearful voice painted her as the helpless victim, easily winning his sympathy and indulgence. But the moment his back was turned, her true face emerged. Arrogance and disdain flashed in her eyes as she treated Luis's mother like a mere servant. Luis's mother, however, was no pushover. Every day, she had nutritious meals sent to Emma under the pretense of ensuring the baby's health. But those so-called nutritious dishes were oily, heavy, and packed with calories. At first, Emma forced herself to eat in front of Luis's father to maintain her innocent image. But Luis's mother was relentless, watching her like a hawk and ensuring she finished every bite. Within 2 weeks, Emma had gained nearly 20 pounds. Her once slender figure swelled like a balloon, and even her delicate face rounded out. The tension between the two white lotuses grew fiercer by the day. Servants tiptoed cautiously through the mansion, terrified of being caught in the crossfire. And Luis? Caught in this whirlwind of chaos, he drowned himself deeper in alcohol, numbing his pain. Before Emma even gave birth, his reckless drinking led to a drunk driving accident. Luis fell into a coma, becoming nothing more than a vegetative state. As for Emma's child, the baby was lost after a violent altercation with Luis's mother, where she was shoved and tumbled down the stairs. Just as Luis's mother was reeling from tragedy after tragedy, yet another blow struck. Luis's father's illegitimate son made his grand entrance into the household. As for the rest of their story, I don't know, and I don't care to find out. Their grudges, their downfalls, their twisted fates, they've all faded into the past, lost in the darkness of their own making. I won't let their misfortunes cast a shadow over my life. Now, I have beauty, wealth, parents who love me, and a man who cherishes me with all his heart. Every single day, I am surrounded by love, and for that, I silently thank fate. Because after everything, after all the suffering, the betrayals, the heartbreak, I still found my way to the right person.